The sweet scent of roses filled the air at the Golden Bay Hotel's grand ballroom. Rose petals scattered across the marble floor created a path to the altar, where a beautiful bride stood in her ivory wedding dress, her hands trembling as she read a hastily written note for the third time. "I can't do this. The company needs me. I'm sorry." Those were the only words her billionaire fiancé had left behind. No explanation, no goodbye, just 8 cold words that shattered her world. The bride's perfectly applied makeup now streaked down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair coming undone as she struggled to breathe through her sobs. 200 guests sat in uncomfortable silence. The string quartet had stopped playing mid-song when the wedding planner announced the ceremony's cancellation. Now, whispers echoed through the hall like angry bees, each guest offering their own theory about what had gone wrong. "I heard his company was in trouble," one guest whispered. "Maybe he found out something about her," another suggested. "Poor girl, left at the altar by a billionaire." The bride's mother rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "Sweetheart, let's get you out of here," she whispered, trying to shield her from the piercing stares and not-so-subtle phone cameras capturing her heartbreak. But the bride couldn't move. Her legs felt like they were made of stone. Just an hour ago, she had been the happiest woman alive, preparing to marry the man she'd met 3 years ago at a charity gala. He wasn't just any man. He was a self-made tech billionaire, featured in business magazines and known for revolutionizing artificial intelligence. Yet beneath his successful exterior, she had fallen in love with his quirky sense of humor, his passion for old movies, and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about changing the world through technology. The wedding planner approached cautiously, her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Ma'am, should I start informing the guests to—" She paused, searching for the right words, "to leave." The bride nodded numbly, then suddenly rushed to the nearest bathroom. Morning sickness, though it struck at all hours, had been her constant companion for the past few weeks. She hadn't told him yet. She'd planned to share the news during their honeymoon in Bali. Now, kneeling on the cold bathroom floor in her $1,000 wedding dress, she realized she was truly on her own. Her best friend found her there, helped her clean up, and held her hand as she took deep breaths. "You're stronger than this," her friend reminded her. "You were somebody before him, and you'll be somebody after him." Those words sparked something inside her. She had graduated top of her class, was halfway through law school, and had dreams of her own before love swept her off her feet. Looking in the mirror, she wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders. The woman staring back at her wasn't just an abandoned bride, she was a survivor. Back in the ballroom, most guests had already left, leaving behind half-empty champagne glasses and gift boxes that would need to be returned. Her mother was directing the cleanup, trying to keep busy rather than break down. The bride walked up to her mother and hugged her tightly. "Mom, I need to tell you something," she whispered. Her mother's eyes widened as she shared her secret. Instead of the shock or disappointment she expected, her mother's face filled with determination. "Then we'll handle it together," she said firmly. "You and this baby, or whatever God blesses us with, will never be alone." That evening, as she changed out of her wedding dress, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Her runaway fiancé's company had just announced a major breakthrough and a billion-dollar deal with a tech giant. She turned off her phone, placed her engagement ring in a drawer, and made a promise to herself and her unborn child. She would rise from this stronger. She would finish law school, build her career, and create a beautiful life, with or without a man by her side. What she didn't know then was that fate had an even bigger surprise in store, one that would turn her world upside down in the most unexpected way. The morning sickness that had been plaguing her wasn't just morning sickness. The tiny life growing inside her would soon multiply, setting the stage for a story that would leave everyone speechless, especially the man who had walked away. As she drifted off to sleep that night, her mother sleeping on the couch nearby, her hand rested protectively over her stomach. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she allowed herself to dream of a future filled with baby laughs and tiny footsteps, even if that future looked nothing like what she had planned. 8 months after the wedding that never was, the young mother-to-be sat in her doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound screen in disbelief. The technician had gone to get the doctor, and now both of them were pointing at the monitor with amazed expressions. 4, the doctor said again, circling different areas on the screen. You're carrying quadruplets. 4 healthy babies. The room started spinning. 1 baby had seemed manageable. 2 would have been challenging but doable. But 4? The doctor's voice faded into background noise as she tried to process this information. We'll need to schedule more frequent checkups, high-risk pregnancy, best facilities. The doctor's words filtered back in fragments. Her mother, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand tightly. We'll figure this out, she whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. Together. The following months transformed her body and her life. Her small apartment became a storage space for baby supplies, 4 of everything. 4 cribs, 4 car seats, mountains of diapers, and tiny clothes in different colors. Her law school professors worked with her to attend classes virtually when bed rest became necessary. The pregnancy became local news. Abandoned bride expecting quadruplets ran as a headline in the city paper. She turned down all interview requests, focusing instead on her studies and preparing for the babies. Her mother moved in, converting the small home office into her bedroom. Friends from law school created a meal preparation schedule for after the births. At 30 weeks, cold water broke. The hospital room buzzed with activity. Teams of nurses and doctors moved with practiced precision as she was rushed into the delivery room. Her mother's face appeared and disappeared behind surgical masks as the medical team prepared for the cesarean section. 4 separate teams standing by, someone announced. NICU ready. The next hour passed in a blur of sensation and sound. And then, one by one, 4 tiny cries filled the room. Girl, announced the first doctor. Another girl, called the second. A boy, said the third with excitement. And 1 more beautiful girl, concluded the 4th. Each baby, though tiny, was perfectly formed. They were whisked away to incubators, their mother catching only glimpses of scrunched-up faces and tiny fists. Her last thought before the medication pulled her under was that she needed to buy more pink clothes. Recovery was a marathon. The babies needed to stay in the ICU for 6 weeks, growing stronger each day. She split her time between the hospital and her law books, studying while pumping breast milk, attending virtual classes from the NICU waiting room. The nurses marveled at how different each baby was, even in those early days. The firstborn was always alert, watching everything. The second kept her hands near her face, fingers constantly moving. The boy had a mighty cry that could wake the entire nursery. And the youngest girl was the calm one, sleeping peacefully through her siblings' fussing. Finally, after what felt like endless paperwork and preparation, it was time to bring them home. The hospital staff had trained her and her mother on caring for multiple infants, feeding schedules, breathing monitors, temperature taking. Their small apartment had been transformed into an efficient baby care unit, with stations for feeding, changing, and sleeping. The first night home was overwhelming. The babies seemed to tag-team their crying. As soon as one settled, another would start. Her mother handled 2 while she managed the other 2, trading off for feedings every 3 hours. By morning, both women were exhausted but proud. They had done it. 1 night down, many more to go. As the weeks passed, they developed a rhythm. Her mother handled the morning shift while she attended online classes. She took the afternoon shift while her mother napped. They shared the evening duties, transforming diaper changes and feedings into a carefully choreographed dance. The babies' personalities emerged more clearly each day. The firstborn was fascinated by colors and movement, turning her head to follow anything bright. The second loved music, calming instantly when anyone sang. The boy was protective, crying whenever his sisters were upset. The youngest developed an early smile that could light up the room. Law school administrators worked with her to create a flexible schedule. She took some classes online, others in person when her mother could watch the babies. Classmates came over to study, helping with the babies between reviewing cases. Her professors allowed her to bring the babies to office hours when necessary, the quadruplets sleeping in their massive stroller while she discussed legal precedents. 6 months in, she received an unexpected package. Inside was a news magazine with her former fiancé on the cover, celebrating his company's latest success. She looked at his smiling face, then at her babies playing on their mat. His success was measured in billions, but hers was counted in tiny heartbeats and midnight cuddles. The package also contained a letter from a leading law firm offering her a part-time internship with flexible hours. They had read about her story and were impressed by her determination to continue her education while raising 4 infants. It wasn't the life she had planned, but somehow it was better, messier, harder, but filled with more love than she had ever imagined possible. That night, after the babies were finally asleep, she sat in the quiet living room surrounded by baby bottles and law books. Her mother brought her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "You're doing an amazing job," her mother said softly. Looking at the peaceful faces of her sleeping children, she smiled. She didn't need a billionaire or a fancy wedding. She had something better. She had purpose, love, and 4 tiny reasons to succeed. 5 years passed in a whirlwind of first steps, first words, and countless milestones multiplied by 4. The young mother had not only survived but thrived, graduating from law school with honors while raising her quadruplets. Her tiny apartment had been traded for a modest house with a backyard, bought with her starting salary at a prestigious law firm. Morning routines in their household were like a carefully conducted symphony. "Sweetie, your cereal goes in your mouth, not your sister's hair," she called out to her son while braiding her eldest daughter's hair. The second daughter was already dressed, nose buried in a children's science magazine. The youngest sat at the kitchen table, humming while drawing colorful pictures. Her mother, still their rock of support, helped pack 4 different lunchboxes. "Don't forget, it's show and tell today," she reminded them, tucking notes into each box. The children had inherited their mother's intelligence and their father's drive, though she never spoke of him to them. The young lawyer had built a reputation as a force to be reckoned with in corporate law. Her experience juggling 4 toddlers while studying had given her extraordinary multitasking abilities. Senior partners noticed how she could handle complex cases while keeping track of minute details. Her empathy, developed through parenthood, helped her connect with clients in a way her colleagues couldn't match. That morning, as she dropped the children at their kindergarten class, she had no idea her carefully constructed world was about to shift. Each child hugged her goodbye in their own special way, the eldest with a tight squeeze, the second with a quick peck, the boy with both a hug and a kiss, and the youngest with their secret handshake. "Love you to the moon and back times 4, she said, their daily parting ritual. And back again. They chorused, running into their classroom. At the office, her assistant waited with an unusually serious expression. "The partners want to see you," he said, handing her a coffee. "It's about the new tech acquisition case." The conference room was filled with senior partners when she arrived. The managing partner stood at the head of the table, laying out documents. "We've just landed the biggest case of the year," he announced. "A major tech company is being acquired. We're representing the buyers, and we need our best team on this." Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the company name. It was his company, the one her former fiancé had chosen over their wedding day. The company had grown exponentially over the past 5 years, becoming a leader in artificial intelligence technology. "You'll be lead counsel on this," the managing partner continued. "Your track record with tech acquisitions is impressive, and the client specifically requested you after seeing your work on the Microtech deal." She took a deep breath, steadying her hands under the table. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. First meeting with the sellers team at 9 a.m. That evening, she stayed late at the office, reviewing every detail of the case. The company's financials, patents, employee contracts. She memorized it all. Her mother called to say the children were asking for their bedtime story. "Put me on speaker," she said, and launched into their favorite tale about 4 magical stars that fell from the sky, each with a special power. She had created the story when they were babies, and it had evolved as they grew. After hanging up, she looked at her reflection in the office window. The scared bride from 5 years ago was gone. In her place stood a confident attorney, a devoted mother, and a woman who had rebuilt her life on her own terms. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend. "Just heard about the case. Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay," she replied. "I'm ready." That night, she pulled out the old engagement ring from her drawer. She had kept it as a reminder, not of what she'd lost, but of what she'd gained. Her life had taken an unexpected turn, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be. She researched recent interviews with her former fiancé, studying the man he'd become. His company had revolutionized the tech industry, just as he dreamed. But articles noted his solitary lifestyle, his workaholic tendencies, his absence from social events. He had chosen his company over love, and it seemed he'd stuck to that choice. The next morning, she dressed with extra care. Her power suit, supple makeup, hair perfectly styled. Her mother noticed her nervous energy while helping with the children's breakfast. "Remember who you are," her mother said softly. "You're not just facing your past, you're showing it your present." The children picked up on her mood, each offering comfort in their own way. Her eldest straightened her jacket with careful hands. The second recited good luck facts she'd learned about court cases. Her son offered his favorite toy dinosaur for good luck. The youngest drew a quick picture of her mother as a superhero. As she drove to work, she realized this case wasn't just about facing her past, it was about showcasing her future. She had built something beautiful from heartbreak, a career, a family, a life filled with love and purpose. Parking at the office, she took a final moment to center herself. Tomorrow, she would sit across from the man who had left her at the altar. But she wouldn't be meeting him as an abandoned bride. She would meet him as a successful attorney, a devoted mother, and a woman who had turned life's biggest surprise into her greatest blessing. The elevator ride to the conference room felt like ascending to a battlefield. But her weapons weren't spite or bitterness. They were competence, professionalism, and the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. After all, she thought, straightening her shoulders and checking her reflection one last time, some people pursue success in boardrooms. Others find it in the chaotic symphony of bedtime stories, kindergarten art, and love multiplied by 4. The law firm's largest conference room buzzed with anticipation. Junior associates arranged documents while paralegals set up laptops and presentation screens. The young attorney stood by the window, watching the city wake up, her hand unconsciously touching the locket containing a tiny photo of her quadruplets. "They're here," her assistant whispered, poking his head through the door. She turned, straightening her suit jacket. 5 years of preparation hadn't really prepared her for this moment. The door opened and a stream of lawyers and executives filed in. Then she saw him, her former fiancé. He'd aged well, though faint silver streaks now touched his temples. He was focused on his phone, not yet noticing her. "Let's begin," she said, her voice steady and professional. At the sound of her voice, he froze. His head snapped up, phone forgotten in his hand. The color drained from his face as recognition dawned. "Good morning, everyone," she continued, ignoring his shocked expression. "We're here to discuss the terms of the proposed acquisition." She launched into her presentation, laying out points with precision and clarity. Years of reading bedtime stories had made her an excellent narrator, and she kept the room engaged despite the technical details. Her former fiancé barely spoke, his eyes fixed on her face. The other executives picked up his slack, asking questions and raising concerns. She addressed each point methodically, her responses showing deep understanding of both the legal and technical aspects. During a break, she stepped out to check her phone. A message from her mother showed the quadruplets dressed for their school play. 4 identical tree costumes for their forest-themed performance. The photo made her smile, reminding her why she was here, not for revenge, but for their future. Returning to the conference room, she noticed her portfolio had fallen, spilling some papers. As she gathered them, a recent family photo slipped out, all 4 children at the beach, their matching dimples on display as they built sandcastles. Before she could grab it, her former fiancé picked it up. Time seemed to stop as he stared at the photo. She saw his hands begin to shake as he studied the children's faces. The resemblance was undeniable. They had his dimples, his eye color, the same curious tilt of the head she'd once found so endearing. "Are they?" He couldn't finish the sentence. "We should focus on the acquisition," she said firmly, taking back the photo. But the damage was done. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of tension and unspoken questions. As other attendees filed out for lunch, he remained seated. "How old are they?" His voice was barely a whisper. 5, she replied, gathering her documents. "They'll be 6 in November." He did the math quickly, his face paling further. "The wedding? You were pregnant?" "Yes." She met his gaze steadily. "With quadruplets." "Why didn't you tell me?" The question ignited a spark of anger she'd thought long buried. "Tell you? You left me at the altar with a note." "A note?" Her professional composure cracked slightly. Besides, you made your choice very clear. Your company needed you, remember? Security cameras would later show him sinking into his chair, looking decades older in moments. She took advantage of his silence to leave the room, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor as she sought refuge in her office. Her phone buzzed, a video from her mother. The quadruplets were practicing their lines for the play. "Look, Mummy," they called out in unison, waving their tree branches. The sight of their happy faces centered her, washing away the morning's tension. But peace was short-lived. Her assistant appeared at her door. "He's asking to see you. Says he won't leave until you talk." She squared her shoulders. "Tell him all communication should go through the legal teams. He's crying in the conference room." That was unexpected. The tech billionaire, who was known for his cold logic and brilliant business strategies, crying in her firm's conference room. She remembered a different man who had cried during set movies and when he talked about his late mother. Taking a deep breath, she returned to the conference room. He sat there, looking lost, the photo of the quadruplets now creased from his tight grip. "4 of them?" he asked hoarsely. "Yes. 2 identical girls, 1 fraternal girl and a boy." Do they know about me?" She shook her head. "They know they have a father. They know he had important work to do. That's all." "Important work," he repeated bitterly. "I built an empire while my children were learning to walk." "They're happy," she said firmly. "They're loved. They're thriving." He looked up at her, his eyes red. "I want to meet them." "No." Her response was immediate. "You don't get to waltz in after 5 years and disrupt their lives. They're not a company you can acquire when it suits you. They're my children too." "Legally, yes, but being a father is more than DNA. It's midnight feedings and fever scares. It's kindergarten presentations and scraped knees. It's being there every day, even when you're exhausted and overwhelmed. Where were you for all of that?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 5 years of absence. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her mother. The school play was about to start. "I have to go," she said, gathering her things. "My children are performing in their school play today. We'll resume acquisition discussions tomorrow." As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Please, at least tell me their names." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. The names she'd chosen, each with special meaning, each representing hope and strength. But those names, like so much else, were something he'd lost the right to know 5 years ago. "Tomorrow, we talk business," she said finally. "Just business." She left him there, surrounded by acquisition papers and profit projections, while she rushed to watch 4 little trees dance on a kindergarten stage. In the end, she thought, some things were worth more than all the tech empires in the world. The next morning, her peaceful breakfast routine with the quadruplets was interrupted by an urgent call from her law firm. Her former fiancé's lawyers had filed emergency papers requesting DNA testing and temporary visitation rights. The acquisition deal was now tangled with personal legal battles. "Mummy, why are you frowning?" her youngest daughter asked, pushing a hand-drawn picture across the table. It showed their family, 4 small figures holding hands with a tall one, hearts drawn all around them. "Just grown-up stuff, sweetie," she answered, tucking the drawing into her briefcase. Her mother gave her a concerned look over the children's heads as she helped them pack their school bags. At the office, her team scrambled to respond to the legal challenge. The morning news already carried headlines about the tech billionaire's surprise quadruplets. Reporters camped outside the law firm, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had raised 4 children while building a legal career. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends and colleagues. But the most disturbing news came from her children's school. Someone matching her ex-fiancé's description had been spotted watching the playground during recess. She rushed to the school, heart pounding. The principal met her at the entrance. "We've increased security," he assured her. "No unauthorized persons are allowed near the children." Through the window, she could see her 4 little ones playing together, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. The eldest was organizing a game as usual. The second was showing her friends a science experiment with leaves. Her son was sharing his snack with a classmate, while the youngest danced to music only she could hear. Back at the office, she faced a conference room full of lawyers, hers and his. Her former fiancé sat across the table, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. The DNA test is non-negotiable, his lawyer stated, and my client has rights as their father. She leaned forward. Rights? Let's talk about responsibilities first. 5 years of absent parenthood doesn't simply vanish because now he's interested. The discussion grew heated. His team brought up his wealth, suggesting the children would benefit from his resources. Her team countered with evidence of her excellent parenting and the children's stable, happy life. I can provide them with everything, he interrupted, speaking directly to her. The best schools, travel, opportunities. They already have everything they need, she replied calmly. Love, stability, happiness. They don't need private jets or summer homes. But legally, she knew she couldn't prevent the DNA test. That afternoon, she sat down with her mother to discuss how to handle this with the children. They're smart, her mother said. They notice everything. Better they hear it from you than overhear something at school. That evening, she gathered her little ones in their favorite spot. The reading nook filled with pillows and stuffed animals. Remember how we talked about your daddy being away for work? She began gently. 4 pairs of eyes watched her intently. Is he coming back? Her son asked, hugging his favorite dinosaur plush. He would like to meet you, she said carefully. But first, the doctors need to do a special test. Like a science experiment, she added, seeing her second daughter's interest peak. Will it hurt? The youngest asked, climbing into her lap. Not at all, sweetheart. They just need to touch your cheek with a soft cotton swab. Like cleaning your face, but gentler. The eldest studied her face. Are you sad, Mommy? No, baby. I'm just thinking a lot. You know how much I love you all, right? To the moon and back ×4. They chose their familiar phrase. The DNA testing day arrived too quickly. The hospital had arranged a private area to avoid media attention. Her former fiancé was there, standing awkwardly as each child had their cheeks swabbed. He tried to make conversation with them, but they stayed close to their mother, shy around this stranger who watched them so intensely. The result surprised no one. He was their father. His lawyers immediately pushed for visitation rights. But the children's reaction to meeting him had made her more protective, not less. That night, unable to sleep, she found her second daughter awake, looking at stars through her telescope. Mommy, is that man going to take us away? Her heart broke at the fear in her daughter's voice. No, sweetie, no one will ever take you away from me. But the next day brought more challenges. Her ex-fiancé had begun sending gifts, expensive toys, electronics, even a pony. She returned everything. This wasn't about money, it was about their emotional well-being. The children started asking questions about the gifts appearing and disappearing. Their school reported more unauthorized attempts to contact them. Despite security measures, their father had managed to send messages through other parents. She requested an emergency hearing with the family court judge. In her office, preparing for the hearing, she spread out 5 years' worth of documents, medical records, school reports, photographs of every milestone. This wasn't just about DNA. It was about 5 years of life, love, and family bonds that couldn't be bought or legally mandated. Her mother brought her coffee and wisdom. Remember, you're not fighting against him having a relationship with them. You're fighting for their right to build that relationship at their own pace. Looking at her children's latest artwork decorating her office walls, she knew what she had to do. This wasn't a corporate acquisition where winners take all. This was about 4 small hearts that needed protection, understanding, and time. Tomorrow, she would face him in court, but tonight she had 4 bedtime stories to read, 8 little hands to hold, and 4 foreheads to kiss goodnight. In the end, that's what this battle was really about, not the past they couldn't change, but the future they needed to build carefully, one gentle step at a time. The family courthouse buzzed with whispered conversations as both legal teams prepared their arguments. The young mother sat straight-backed in her chair, reviewing her notes one last time. Across the aisle, her former fiancé looked uncomfortable in his designer suit, his usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous fidgeting. All rise, the bailiff called out as the judge entered the courtroom. The proceedings began with his lawyers painting a picture of a successful father who could provide unlimited opportunities for his children. They showed slides of prestigious schools, enrichment programs, and the kind of life his billions could buy. When it was her turn to speak, she took a different approach. She pulled out a worn notebook, 5 years of daily entries about the quadruplets. "Your Honor," she began, "I'd like to share what real parenting looks like." She read from the journal. First words, first steps, first days of school. The time all four got chickenpox at once. The night her son had a nightmare and how his sisters all crawled into his bed to comfort him. The Halloween when they insisted on being the Four Seasons, and she stayed up all night making costumes. "Money can buy opportunities," she said, her voice steady. "But it can't buy the trust that comes from being there every day. It can't buy the kind of bond that forms over thousands of bedtime stories and kissed bruises." The judge listened intently as both sides presented their cases, but just as her lawyer was making final arguments, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Her mother's number flashed on the screen. "Your Honor," her lawyer quickly intervened, "we need a brief recess. There's an emergency involving one of the children." The judge's face softened as she explained that her mother was calling from the school. Her eldest daughter had collapsed during recess. At the hospital, she found her mother trying to keep the other 3 children calm in the waiting room while doctors ran tests. Her former fiancé had followed them there, hovering uncertainly at the edges of their family circle. The doctor's news hit like a thunderbolt. Their daughter had a rare heart condition requiring immediate surgery. The procedure was experimental, expensive, and not covered by insurance. "I'll pay for everything," her ex-fiancé said immediately. "I'll fly in the best specialists from anywhere in the world." She wanted to refuse, to say she could handle it herself, but looking at her daughter's pale face through the ICU window, she knew this wasn't the time for pride. The other 3 children pressed against the window, unusually quiet. Their sister had always been their leader, organizing their games and adventures. Seeing her confined to a hospital bed scared them more than they could express. "Is she going to be okay, Mummy?" her son asked, his small hand clutching her skirt. Before she could answer, her ex-fiancé knelt down to their level. "Your sister is very strong," he said gently, "and she's going to have the best doctors helping her. Sometimes even the strongest people need a little help." The children looked at him with cautious interest. It was the first time he'd spoken to them so directly, and his words seemed to comfort them. Over the next few days, the hospital became their second home. She took leave from work, sleeping in a chair by her daughter's bed. Her other children split time between their grandmother and the hospital, bringing drawings and get-well cards for their sister. To her surprise, her former fiancé proved himself useful beyond just paying bills. He used his connections to bring in top specialists. He set up a comfortable waiting area for the family, complete with toys and books for the other children. Most importantly, he didn't try to take over or push his way into their established family dynamic. The night before the surgery, she found him in the hospital chapel. "Thank you," she said quietly, sitting beside him, "for helping our daughter." He wiped his eyes quickly. "I missed so much," he whispered. "Their first words, first steps. I don't want to miss anything else. But I understand now, I can't just buy my way into their lives." The surgery lasted 8 hours. The whole family waited together, mother, grandmother, 3 scared siblings, and a father just beginning to understand what family really meant. When the doctor finally emerged with good news, they all cried with relief. Recovery would take time, but their daughter was strong. Each day brought small improvements. Her siblings made her laugh, sneaked her extra pudding cups, and refused to leave until visiting hours were strictly enforced. During this time, something shifted in their complex family dynamic. Her ex-fiancé proved himself capable of being patient and considerate. He asked permission before visiting, brought appropriate gifts, books and craft supplies instead of expensive electronics, and most importantly, followed her lead in all interactions with the children. As her daughter grew stronger, they all began to heal, not just from the medical crisis, but from old wounds as well. The court case was put on hold by mutual agreement. Instead of fighting over custody, they began discussing how to build a healthy relationship between the children and their father, one careful step at a time. One evening, as she watched all 4 children teaching their father their special bedtime handshake, she realized that sometimes the worst moments can lead to unexpected blessings. Her daughter's illness had forced them all to focus on what really mattered, not court battles or past hurts, but the happiness and well-being of 4 remarkable children who had enough love in their hearts for both parents. "Mommy, Daddy doesn't know our special star story," her youngest called out. "Can you tell it again?" And so she began the familiar tale of 4 magical stars, aware that their own story was entering a new chapter, one where past mistakes didn't dictate future happiness, and where family could mean more than they'd ever imagined. 1 year after the hospital crisis, the family gathered in the backyard of their new home. It wasn't the mansion their father had initially proposed. Instead, it was a comfortable house with a garden, chosen together as a family, just a few blocks from their grandmother's place. The eldest daughter, fully recovered from her surgery, was teaching her father the proper way to braid hair. "No, Daddy, you have to cross this part first," she explained patiently, while her sisters giggled at his clumsy attempts. Their mother watched from the kitchen window as she prepared snacks with her own mother. The past year had brought changes none of them could have predicted. The court case had been withdrawn, replaced by mediation sessions and family therapy. They'd worked out a schedule that put the children's needs first. Who would have thought, her mother mused, arranging cookies on a plate, that a heart crisis would heal so many other hearts? Outside, their son was showing his father how to build the perfect sandcastle in the sandbox they'd installed together. The youngest was decorating it with flowers, while the second daughter calculated the optimal angle for the drawbridge. The mother remembered their first attempted family dinner months ago. The awkward silences, the children's uncertain glances between their parents, their father's nervous attempts to connect. Now, weekly family dinners were filled with chatter and laughter, each child eager to share their achievements and adventures. Their father had learned to navigate his new role with humility and patience. He traded late-night business meetings for science fair projects and ballet recitals. His office now displayed crayon drawings alongside business awards, and his phone's wallpaper showed 4 grinning faces instead of stock prices. "Mommy, come see," called the youngest, waving from the garden. "We're planting the flowers you got us." She joined them outside, watching as each child carefully placed their chosen seedling in the soil. Their father had learned each child's favorite flower: roses for the eldest, sunflowers for the second, daisies for the youngest, and hardy succulents for their son who worried about plants getting thirsty. "Remember to give them space to grow," she reminded them, a lesson that applied to more than just gardening. Later that afternoon, as the children played their invented game of space explorers in the treehouse their father had helped build, the parents sat on the patio, sharing a quiet moment. "I was so wrong," he said softly, watching their children's imaginative play. "I thought success meant bigger profits, more innovations, changing the world through technology. But real success was right here, wearing mismatched socks and asking for bedtime stories." She looked at him, really looked at him. The sharp business suits had given way to casual clothes with occasional paint stains from art projects. The constant phone checking had been replaced by genuine presence. He'd learned that time wasn't just money, it was memories, growth, and love. "They need both of us," she acknowledged. "Different strengths, different lessons. Your determination shows in how they tackle problems. My patience appears in how they help each other." The second daughter's voice floated down from the treehouse. "Dad, we need an expert opinion on our rocket design." "Judy calls," he grinned, heading to the treehouse. "Though I'm pretty sure a 6-year-old's rocket design might be more innovative than anything my company's working on." That evening, as both parents tucked the children into bed, their eldest asked for the story of how their family came together. It had become their favorite tale, though the parents told slightly different versions depending on age-appropriate details. "Once upon a time," the mother began, "there was a woman who thought her heart was broken. But instead it grew bigger," their father continued, "big enough for 4 amazing surprises. And a daddy who had to learn that the best things in life can't be bought," added their son sleepily. "Like love," chirped the youngest. "And family," murmured the second daughter. "And forgiveness," whispered the eldest, wise beyond her years. After kisses goodnight and checking for monsters under beds, the parents retreated to the living room. Papers for the company merger, finally moving forward after being delayed by more important family matters, sat on the coffee table. "Remember when we thought this merger was the biggest challenge we'd face?" She smiled, sorting through the documents. He picked up a family photo taken at the children's recent school play, 4 little trees and 2 proud parents. "I'd almost lost the chance to be in pictures like this," he said quietly. Their grandmother, preparing to leave for her own home nearby, paused to squeeze both their shoulders. "But you didn't," she reminded them. "Sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as its biggest challenges." That night, after their grandmother had gone home and the house was quiet except for the soft sounds of sleeping children, the parents sat in the garden they'd planted together. Above them, 4 particularly bright stars twinkled in the sky, just like in the bedtime story they told their children. "To think," he mused, "I once believed changing the world meant inventing new technology. But these 4 little people will change the world just by being themselves." She smiled, remembering the scared bride she'd been, the determined single mother she'd become, and the co-parent she was now. "They already have changed the world, our world at least." From upstairs came the sound of small feet padding to the bathroom, their nightly ritual of one child waking and the others following in solidarity. Without words, both parents stood to guide their little ones back to bed. As they climbed the stairs together, she realized that sometimes love stories don't end at the altar. Sometimes they begin there, take unexpected detours, multiply by 4, and find their way home through the wisdom of children's hearts.